Hello again, everybody. This is Mr. Everything, and I am coming at you with another Wargaming and miniature video. In this video, we're going to be building some 15mm Bocage for my World War II gaming. Okay, so now I've got some pink foam here, and I'm trying to line it up on my table mat here. And I want my bocage to be taller than a soldier in World War II. So here's my German Grenadiers. They're 15mm. And I'm kind of using that as a guideline. If I could cut the bocage at like 10mm and just follow a line on the table. But I think that I want to go a little bit bigger than that. I am going to be mounting this on a 3/4 inch wood popsicle stick. But the popsicle stick's like 20mm wide. So I'm going to cut like a 15mm. See, 10mm here is just too short. That's like a regular hedge. I want this berm to be taller and more substantial. So I decided to go with 15mm. This pink foam is 1/2 inch thick and 12 inches across. It's actually just under 12 inches. It's more like 11 7/8, but that's fine. And then I'm just using a sharp knife, and we're going to go ahead and cut this. Now you can always use a foam hot knife, but I found that if I want to use a straight edge like this, if I want precise cuts, I need to use my X-Acto. All right, we got that cut. Let me just set everything off to the side. And the next step is, because I'm making 6-inch bocage strips, I'll need to cut that in half. Those are my 6-inch popsicle sticks. And yeah, so this one piece here cut in half should fit on those two right there. All right, so I just determine how long this stick is, which is, it's close to 30 centimeters. So what I do is I go to 15 and I just cut it so that I've got a mark, and then I just cut it in half. Now the foam is going to reinforce my popsicle sticks and keep them from warping, but it's not 100%. There's still going to be a little bit of warping with the Elmers that I'm using to attach it. I'm trying to determine which side is 15mm and which side is 1/2 inch. Because it's so close. 1/2 inch is 12.7mm. It's not really that important. I could have cut it at a full inch. I could have cut it at, a 1/2 inch square. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. So let's just go ahead and glue this down to the stick. So I get my Elmer's glue out, and I just put a very thin bead along the stick. One reason why I don't want the water in the Elmer's to cause the popsicle stick to bow or shrink in any way. So I tried to use as little as I can. Now I'm wiggling the foam around on top of the stick to get, first of all, to press it down into the wood, but also to spread the Elmers around to get more coverage. And I'm trying to make sure that I overhang both ends of the popsicle stick, because you don't want, it's easier to cut the foam than to cut the wood. I mean, you don't want to. You want it to be universal, or, not universal. What's the word I'm looking for? You want it to be consistent across the board. So I basically will cut it down to the size of the popsicle stick. Okay, so it doesn't overhang the popsicle stick on the sides. It does overhang a little bit on the ends, but I'm going to put these together, and I'm going to put a weight on top of it and allow it to dry. And like that, with the weight on it, it will prevent it from bowing up. Okay, now I've already done a couple of these previously. I did this one in the morning, but I did the other two the day before. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my knife and I'm going to trim or shave, I guess is what you would call, whittle off the top, just giving it a more natural mound look. So it's going to be, what I'm doing is I'm kind of going from just off center from the top down to the popsicle stick to give it kind of a slopey look. But you can make it rounded, you can make it flatter, taller. Every bocage should be different. There should not be two identical. They shouldn't come out of a 3D printer. You should make each one unique. Always cut away from yourself with the X-Acto knife or any knife. See, now I'm saying you could cut too much. If you shave too much, then what you're going to do is you're going to wind up lowering the height of your bocage, which there's no problem with that, because some bocages were taller and shorter than others. And I'm talking about just like that. And then what I'll do is I'll flatten off the top to make applying the top foliage a lot easier. Okay, so right now I'm just shaving, whittling down, giving it its natural incline. Because what is bocage? Bocage is a byproduct of farmers over the centuries plowing their fields. And when they plow their fields and they come upon a rock, a giant stone or boulder, what they'll do is they'll pick that rock up and they'll carry it off to the edge of the field and just pile it up. And then over the centuries, these rocks gradually formed a berm or a wall. So they would have these walls around their farmland, around their fields, their crops. And over time, vegetation would grow on top of these berms, and then trees would grow, plants would grow, and eventually it became like the rocks basically became hidden, because now they're underneath all this, the bushes and grass and dirt. And in World War II, that became an obstacle when the Americans were trying to push inland from Normandy Beach into the countryside. They ran into these bocage obstacles. They're not just hedges that a tank can just drive over. They would have to go around or find the actual entrance to the field, and those became very predictable, and the Germans had those, laid out in their gun sights and things like that. And so you would shoot from one bocage to the next, trying to shoot, the enemy or hiding behind his bocage when you're hiding behind your bocage. And then I think it was Sergeant McCullen or Sergeant Cullen, something like that, had invented a way to strap some rebar metal beams. He welded that on the front of his tank, or maybe someone else's tank, I don't remember what. But when that tank went over the bocage, it basically tore through the rocks and the created a path. So once that caught on, the Americans could just take any path they wanted, because then they could just go through the bocage the way they wanted to. But for the infantry, it's a different story, and for other vehicles, soft skins and stuff like that, it's a major obstacle. But it's also great cover, great protection from enemy fire. And in a lot of World War II battles in northern France, you are going to need quite a bit of bocage. So I plan to make about 30 to 40 of these, and I figured showing you how I did it would be a benefit for you guys. All right, now the end has to be cut off as well. It has to be rounded with the popsicle stick. So I'm cutting, because when you pair these bocage up, if they are not in a straight line, if they go at an angle, you would need to be able to butt them up against each other. So I rounded the edges of my bocages, and I basically just match the popsicle stick. It's just a good guide. And I noticed, and I remember now, that I didn't do that with the first bocage, so I have to go back and do that. I forgot. Now, don't worry if it's perfect or if it's exact, because first of all, you're going to be covering it with a texturing material and foliage, so don't worry about it. This is just to simulate the berm of rocks that are underneath the grass and the bushes. All right, let me get them all done, and we'll be right back. All right, and you can kind of see how big the berm is. It's a little bit larger than the troops, but not much. Some of it's even sloped down, because like on that one, I cut a pretty good chunk out of the middle to make it uneven. All right, now what I'm using to prime my Bocage styrofoam is this Rust-Oleum Painter's Touch 2X flat. It actually does not melt the styrofoam. I spray it to seal it and to give it a black undercoat. And luckily, the Rust-Oleum 2X Painter's Touch does not melt the styrofoam. All right, now I'm applying over the primed black styrofoam. I'm applying the AK Dark Earth, and I've already done it on the other two, but basically I'm completely covering it front and sides and back, just not underneath, of course. And I paint it all the way down, even on top of the popsicle stick. And I try to get, now where the popsicle stick and the styrofoam meet, there's like a little seam there. And so I try to cover that up and disguise it with the AK Interactive. And I put it on pretty thick so that it gives me a good texture. All right, let's let that dry, and then we'll be right back. It'll wash up. Okay, and the next step is to apply some dark green scatter, and that dark green scatter is going to be put on sparingly and in spotches, basically just to give my other grasses contrast. Now this is a really thick, really what's the word I'm looking for? Long static grass. It looks like wild grass in my opinion, so it might be a really good option. So I'm going to go ahead and use that on the first one. All right, so what I do now is I mix up a patch of Elmer's with some water to before I start applying it to my bocage piece. Unfortunately, I have the camera angled in a way that you can't really see everything that I'm doing, and I apologize for that. So I'm applying glue to the bocage, but I'm scattering the glue around. It's not a 100% coverage. You can kind of see there's brown gaps around and beneath the glue. I'm just basically splattering it on. I'm not trying for a 100% coverage. I'm just trying to get a good amount, and then that way the dark earth will shine through and you'll see the dark earth behind the static grass. Or whatever other flock that I might be using at the time. Okay, that should be pretty good right there. Now I'm just going to take this dark green and I'm just going to put it in 2 or 3 spots per side. And I'm gonna put it pretty thick in the 1 or 2 spots that I cover because I want it to be noticeable. Sprinkling it down on there, and right there's the last spot. There we go. Shake all that off. Perfect. Save all that little extra flock, and let's go with the field grass. The wild grass, I should say. I think it's about 4 to 6 millimeters long. It's very fuzzy. It's more than I would use for my figures. I would only use this on terrain, and really I don't like it very much because it sticks together and it doesn't stick to the how do I say this? It doesn't allow for a lot of static grass to stick to the glue, so it actually kind of, once you shake everything off, it'll be very thin coat. So what I'm doing is I'm going to be putting it on pretty heavy, and then I'm going to use my finger to kind of press it down into the glue to see what kind of coverage I can get out of it. Unfortunately, I don't remember what brand it is of static grass, so I can't recommend the brand. But it is not my normal knock 2.5 millimeter meadow. It's like a green or a dark green static grass. It might be from Woodland Scenics. I don't think so, but I can't remember, to be honest. And I shake it off a little bit, and then I look to see where I see some white from the Elmers, and I try to put a second coat or second layer in that area to give me better coverage. And I also press it in, apply a little bit of compression to it to give it so it'll stick to the glue. And because when it rolls out of my fingers, it's kind of clumpy, it's just not a good static grass in my opinion. But I chose it because it is long and it does look like wild grass or field grass, and I wanted something like that on the bocage. So I gave it a shot. We're going to try 3 different techniques, and then you can take a look and compare and see which one you like best. Okay, right there is where I'm packing it down. Maybe putting a little extra on there. And pressing it in. And I'm not going to shake it off. I'm just going to set it off to the side and let it dry. Hopefully, a bunch of it will stick to the glue, and so when I shake off the excess, it won't be barren. And again, I'm sorry that it's happening just at the edge of the camera. See, that looks good right there, but I also know all of that isn't going to stick. Okay, my next flock that I'm going to use is Woodland Scenics Blended Turf. This is a foam style flock. I used to use foam flock for all my wargaming because it was the easiest and cheapest flock that I could find, and it's a good color and has good coverage. It's easy to use. It just doesn't look as good as static grass. I think the easiest to use is scatter, and I think the best looking is static grass. It's also the hardest to use, but Woodland Scenics Blended Turf is like a good compromise in the middle of the two. Now, when you're looking down at my Woodland Scenics Blended Turf, you'll also notice that there are pieces of other flocks in there. There's even some grit in there. I basically, whenever I scoop up all the flock or whatever, I always put it in the bin, and over time it picks up more than just the blended turf, so it becomes like a mix mash of other types of flock as well. All right, so we got the glue on the stones. I'm going to sprinkle the dark green onto 2 or 3 areas per side. And then we'll get to putting the blended turf on. Okay, again, I'm going to set that off to the side. Shake off all the dark green flock. I'm going to try to save as much of that as possible. And then here we go with the blended turf. Blended turf goes on pretty easily, and it also has really good coverage and good adherence to whatever glue you've got underneath. So it's actually a good compromise. It's ease of use. Now, its look it's okay, but I would prefer a static grass, or even a scatter is probably, I don't know, depending on which brand you go with. The Army Painter Grass Green is also a really good choice for scatter. But I like it on bigger models. When it comes to 15 millimeter, I think that this blended turf is a good compromise. Okay, I shook a little bit off, and then I saw that there is some areas that glue is shining through. So I got to hit those up as just touch-ups. All right, we'll set that off to the side and we'll get started on the next one. All right, now this last one is my favorite. It is, of course, the Knock Spring Meadow Static Grass. It's also very short. I think it's like 2.5 millimeters. But we're going to start with the dark green again, and then we'll hit it with the you can see it's a much brighter color. I think that bright color works with the dark stone underneath, the dark earth, because it brings its temperature down. So I do believe I don't know, I love the Spring Meadow. All right, now we got the glue going on. We're scattering it around, same consistency, basically spreading it out, just scattering it, leaving some brown shining through so that you get the brown. Now I'm going to hit it up with some dark green. This time I'm going to put it lower to the ground, or the base of the bocage. No real reason, just maybe to enhance the shadowing effect of it. Now we're going to go ahead and go with the Spring Meadow. And by the Spring Meadow being the light green, it will really contrast against the dark green scatter, but also against the dark brown, dark earth underneath. And it goes on very well. It falls well and it sticks well. When you start getting to the really long static grass, then you start running into trouble, in my opinion. I'm sorry I'm harping on that, but I feel strongly about it. All right, now we're going to let all of these kind of sit off to the side, and we're going to let them dry a little bit before we move on to the next step, which is to put the foliage on the bocage. All right, now before we put any of the foliage on, the trees and the bushes, what I'm going to do now is use my makeup brush here, and I am going to tap the bottom of each of these bocage to knock off any excess grass flock and basically just clean them up a little bit and bring them down to whatever was stuck in the grass or in the glue. All right, and then from here, once I get all three of these cleaned off, then we'll be right back for the next step. All right, looks pretty good. Let's do them all. Okay, now that I've got them all, I've got some trees out. I've got a variety of different color trees and shapes and sizes, and we'll try to figure out. Now, this one was the first one I did with the field grass or the wild grass, and you can kind of see how thick it is and how scraggly it looks. It's kind of a good effect, but I don't think it's my favorite. Yeah, I don't think that's my favorite effect. Okay, now let's look at the Woodland Scenics blended turf. It's a foam flock. You can see it rests or lays a lot closer to the stone, so it doesn't look like it's thick grass. It's great for like ground carpeting, but not bocage. But now this is like the small static grass. It's one of my favorites for miniatures, for smaller miniatures, and it still looks grassy and it still has a pretty good coverage, and I like the color. So I think this is the one I'm going to be working with. It is the Spring Meadow from Knock. It's just an awesome compromise between grassy and easy to apply. All right, so let's work with this one first. And what I'll do is I'm going to pull a couple of these smaller trees out. These trees are only about 20 millimeters tall, not counting the trunk. And then, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the trunk and I'm going to jab it down into the styrofoam, right? I'm going to poke a hole in the styrofoam like that. I can leave it just like that and be happy. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it out and I'm going to put a drop of Elmer's glue on that hole and then reseat the tree. Not a whole lot of glue, just a little bitty drop. And then as I push in, I'm going to twist as well. Try to take as much of that glue down into the hole with me as possible to get a good seal, so it won't just pop out in the middle of gaming or storage or movement or whatever. It's going to be a permanent fixture. I do the same with this. Now, what you might have noticed is there was no measuring. I basically eyeballed it. I just decided randomly where I was going to put these trees. There's no rhyme or reason. I'm going to have to do about 40 of these bocage, 6-inch. Maybe I need to do some at 8-inch and some at 4-inch, but the majority of them are going to be at 6 inches. And I'm going to have the majority of the bocage are going to have these little trees. Now, the next set of trees are some pretty inexpensive railroading trees that I picked up on Amazon, actually. I think they were like $7 for a dozen trees. Not too bad. I got them for the apple trees that you can see that are still stuck in the foam, but for my Waterloo, my Lay Saint situation I'm going to build. But right there, I'm going to leave a little bit of the trunk exposed like that. So it looks like it's a tree growing out of the top of the bocage. Put a little drop of glue and do the same. I'm going to stick it in and I'm going to twist it. Now you might notice that I stuck this tree in to the bocage right at the edge of where the grass and the ground texture meet, where they transition. That way it just has more of an impact visually in that position. Okay, now I got these other two that I need to stick in, and I'm just going to randomly decide, like, where do I want to put it? I want to put it over here. Okay, I'm going to stick it in. And so some of the bocage will have 2 trees, some will have 3. One bocage that I'm going to be making bespoke for my Lafayette Bridge campaign is going to be wall-to-wall trees all the way across. Yeah, so once I get, if you follow my channel, you can also watch my 15mm project where I build terrain and paint miniatures for my battle group game that I am planning on running down at NashCon. All right, so we got 3 trees in this, and they're just spaced randomly. But I did think that I would put it right at the edge of where the grass and the dirt was. So that was a conscious decision, twisting as I stick it in. And I think I stuck it in just a little bit too far, but that's okay. I don't mind. And then I'm going to stick this one in just a little bit further as well. And when that Elmer's dries, it'll dry clear. I'll show you the end results at the end of the video. All right, now on this next one, I'm going to use these conifers that I have over here. I think, to be honest, I think I bought these either at Hobby Link or from Amazon. I think I paid like $10 for like 30 trees when it comes to these. And these come in a variety of sizes. You can see the short and the long ones. And different colors. You got the dark green and the light green. All right, so I'm going to put 5 trees. I'm going to go excessive. I don't want to use up all my trees on these first few bocage because, like I said, I've got about 40 of them to do. So I don't know if I'm going to... I have a lot of the little trees, the little bush-looking trees. I've got dozens of those. So those are the ones I'm going to be predominantly being used on these bocages. And I even will probably mix them in so they all won't... Because right now I'm putting these together with same for same manufacturer of the trees. But there's nothing saying you can't mix and match your manufacturers of trees. That'll give more of a natural look, I do believe. But staying consistent with the type of tree, like conifer, deciduous, or spruce, or whatever, will make your battlefield look a little bit more consistent. Because if you look out in nature, you will see a predominant, like a forest or a tree copse or whatever, will have a lot of the exact same type of tree. I guess it's because the seeds fall, you know, the pine cones fall or whatever, and a new tree grows. So try to stay with the same trees in the same areas, but on your battlefield, like the entire battlefield, there should be a mixture of trees because you'll have some, well, depending on where you're battling at, but like in France, you should have a mixture. But mostly, I do believe it's mostly coniferous, like conifers, spruce, pine, I'm trying to decide, where do I want to put this thing? Right here? Okay, let's go right here. But that's just from my experience. I could be wrong. I'm not a botanist. But I have looked at a lot of different battlefields. I've been to a lot of battlefields, and those are kinds of things that I pay attention to. I kind of look at, the grass. I look at the bushes. I look at the trees, because when I get to building terrain for my tabletop, I want it to be accurate, because that's me. I'm kind of a what do they call them? A grognard when it comes to wargaming terrain. And for most of us, when we're playing, we don't really care what kind of tree model I have out there. But when I'm putting together the terrain and I'm researching it and I'm trying to build the terrain, that's where I get anal. But when I'm playing, I could care less. Right? I don't care, just as long as I know where the bocage is, or just as long as I know there is a tree there, or what have you. Yeah, my forests, even like my Waterloo forest or my Quatre Bras forest, they could be mixed forests. I don't care. All right, so those trees are in. And like I said, I've got maybe throw another one on there, maybe an alternative style. See, I was even thinking putting an alternate style on there just to fill a gap. But I'm thinking to myself, will that look good if I stick that in there? I don't think it will. I said, nah, I don't think it'll look good. So I decided against it. All right, so we're going to let these trees dry just a tad before I start getting into putting the foliage along the top of it. Okay, and then we'll be right back. All right, I got some clump foliage out. This is my light green clump foliage. I actually have some dark green that I haven't opened yet that I'm going to I've decided I'm going to kind of mix and match, kind of the way the trees are. You see, they're light green and dark green as well. So I'm going to, I don't know, I just like the feel of clump foliage in my fingers. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a bead of white glue along the top of the bocage, and then I'm going to press some of this foliage down into the bead of glue, making kind of a thick hedge, but also it's not really, see, when you use clump foliage, it's not a groomed hedge. It's kind of a wild hedge. You'll see what I mean when I get it in there. And I don't do a whole lot. As you can see, I only did about an inch at a time. That just allows me to control where I'm putting the clump foliage down. It allows me to manage what I'm doing. And again, remember, when the Elmer's dries, it will be, it'll dry clear. All right, and I decided to just go ahead and do the rest of the top. Now, if you're watching this tutorial, obviously you are, it's going to be some dead air here because I'm concentrating on which piece and where I'm going to put it. Do I want it to be sticking up? Do I want it to be flat? How do I want it to look? I do kind of want it to be a little wild. I don't want it to be a groomed hedge. I considered using like a Brillo pad or a manufactured hedge and creating a a groomed hedge that just lays on the top of that. But then that is not what a bocage looks like. A bocage has like some random wild bushes growing on the top. It doesn't have like groomed hedges, in my opinion, from what I've seen. Now on this one, it looks like I'm using almost all light green. I didn't use any dark green on this one. One of the reasons for that is these 3 bocage that I'm doing right now are, not only is it a tutorial to show you how it's done, but it's also an experiment for me to see what looks better and which one, which one do I want to build for my table. So at the end, you can make a judgment as well to see if that looks good. All right, so let's move on to the next one. I'm going to let this sit off to the side and dry. All right, let me go get the other foliage. All right, so I got some dark green clump foliage right here from Woodland Scenics. You can see the dark green on the wax paper. It is much bigger. It's the stuff in my bin has been shredded, where the clump foliage out of the bag is still pretty solid. It's like one solid piece, and you got to break it up and break it off. So I got to get in there and just crank it. There you go. Doesn't want to come out because it's pretty stout. Doesn't want to come off. Okay, there we go. So we got some little bushes, and we're going to stick that on the edge. It's going to be overhanging a little bit. I stuck it up underneath the branches of the tree as well. I think that's going to look okay once it dries. All right. Now this is the Woodland Scenics foam flock. And then I'm going to use, on this one, we're going to do a mixture. I'm probably going to go like 50-50. Light green, dark green. And it will come off. It'll stick to your fingers. It will, the glue will be absorbed by the foam blended turf flock. So sometimes you got to add a little bit more of the Elmer's. Now, another thing that I've considered and I've seen done is, instead of using your generic school glue, you could always use like a tacky glue, where it is more, it's a thicker glue. I didn't want to do that. I figured this Elmer's will work just fine, straight out of the bottle. And you see I'm doing a little bit at a time, and I'm kind of alternating dark green, light green, big or small. I don't want the foliage to look uniform. I want it to look haphazard or ragged. That's part of the appeal. I've also considered using some what's the word I'm looking for? Tufts. But if I was to attach any tufts to the sides, because I was thinking I would put them on the sides, the tuft would stick straight out, and that wouldn't look appropriate because the grass should be growing up, not out. So I would have to trim it or cut it and lay it on its side or something like that. And for that effect, there's no need to use a tuft for that. I could just apply a different coat of flock or just get some loose grass and lay it on the side upright. Because I do have some like field grass that I could do that with. But at this scale, now I'm making them at 15 millimeter. So they're, for a 15 millimeter soldier, there's no need to get that detailed with it, in my opinion. I think the flock over the stones and then the trees and the foliage on the top is really all you need to do. I don't think you need to go too crazy around the sides of the bocage, but if you want, you could maybe just add a few pieces of clump foliage on the side, like these are bushes growing on the side of a bocage. Another reason why you might want to make some 4-inch bocage, because these three are all 6-inch. If you wanted to make some 4-inch bocage, what you could do is combine it with your 6-inch bocages, and you could make a gap. So there would be like a 2-inch gap if you were making like a row of hedges. And that 2-inch gap would be appropriate for a field where farmers would need to get into their field. There would be a pathway, a road, or a trail where they would be able to get into their bocage. Now, you could always just place the bocage on, that's not the piece that fell off, but you could always just place the two 6-inch pieces apart from each other to make a gap. But then if you were trying to line it up with another set, you might need shorter pieces. Plus, if your historically accurate map that you're using requires maybe only 10 inches of bocage, then 2 6s is not going to work, right? Or if you need 8 inches of bocage, then you could always put like 2 4s down. So it's good to have some 4-inch ones made. I don't think I'm going to make an 8-inch one. I think I might make some shorter ones. And that way I can put them out there where the bocage needs to be a little bit longer, a little bit shorter. But 6 inches is a really good length when it comes to 15 millimeter battlefields. Now, in my to scale on my battlefield, I'm doing 1 inch equals 15 meters. Okay, so 6 inches would be around what, 90 meters? Something like that, just under 100 meters. That's the scale of my battlefield. 15 meters to the inch. All right, we got some clump foliage here. Now, there's no reason why or you would need to put any clump foliage in between the trees. If you wanted to do that, you could. I mean, like where the two trees are so close together, you don't need to put any clumps in there. If you want to, that's fine. I'm not going to. I'm only going to put the clump foliage where there's big gaps between the trees. Okay, that one doesn't want to break. Come on now. Now, I could always take a pair of scissors or even an X-Acto knife to it if I wanted to to get it to come apart exactly the way I want it to come apart. But again, I'm not shooting for perfection. I'm shooting for random wildness. So I don't want it to come apart exactly perfectly with like a pair of scissors. I want to tear it. Whoop, coming off. Okay, this is going to need more glue. That's one thing I noticed about the flock. Once you put the glue on the flock, it wants to soak into the flock. So sometimes you got to put a little extra glue on there. And that's one advantage of maybe using a thicker glue, like a tacky glue or something. But I'm not worried about it. Got one on the end there, got some in the middle. Looks like I might need to put some right in there. Now, in some rule sets, Bocage blocks line of sight unless you're right up on the edge of it. And in some rule sets, you can see through it, just obscured, and then others say you can't see through it at all or whatever. So I'm making it for the battle group rule set. And the way I plan to adjudicate the bocage is that you cannot see through it unless you're up next to it. So if you're like adjacent to the bocage, then you can be seen and you can also see past it. But it'll give you hard cover because of the stones, and they're pretty high. Now I'm not going to give it reinforced. I'm just going to give them hard cover. Okay, I think that's good. It looks kind of horrible with the white glue, but that'll dry clear. And once these dry, I'll bring them back and we'll take a close-up look at them, and I'll bring out some figures so you can see what they're going to look like side by side. And the figures I am going to use is German Grenadiers from Plastic Soldier Company. All right, let me clean up here a little bit, and then we'll be right back. All right, here we go. We got all three of them laid out. They're dry. And there's the soldier. That's a German squad, 4-man squad. And you can see what I'm going to kind of move them around, and I want you to kind of take a look at the different flocks, the different grasses that are on them, and look at the dark color compared to light color, and just basically take it all in and kind of see if that's the kind of bocage that you like to see. I love this piece right here. I think it looks really good. And I'm going to hold it up so you can kind of see the scale of the soldiers. They should not be able to see. They maybe could see over it if they were adjacent to it, right? That looks good. But it'll block line of sight if you're not adjacent to it. All right, let's take a look at another one. That's the Woodland Scenics foliage. To me, that doesn't look that good, but it just depends on your aesthetic, what you like. It lays too flat against the rocks, so there's like no grass effect. This one has like a grass effect to it. What do you think? It looks pretty good. I like it. Yeah, the two static grass ones, either the first one or the last one, are my favorites. Yeah. And look at all those trees on there. That looks pretty good. I'm gonna, and then see how they go together really good. And because they're rounded on the ends, you can actually put them together in angles. Like you can make fields however you want. You could even, if there's a lot of bocage on the table and it needs to come to an intersection or something like that, you could easily put something together like that. And that's very well disguised. All right, guys. Well, thanks for coming out and watching this bocage tutorial. Stay apprised of my World War II project, and you'll see all the other bocages I make. And I will see you in the next one.